Hello, everyone, and welcome to part two of my reader's guide to the collection of poetry entitled Red Camaro. My name is Dwaine Rieves, and today I want to delve into some of the more challenging poems in the book, poems that deal with a number of charged subjects, four of them, in fact. Get ready. Sex, sin, jubilation, and Jesus. Yes, sex, sin, jubilation, and Jesus. It sure sounds mighty Southern, doesn't it? And it is, but as a paraphrase from the former Mississippi Governor Haley Barbour implies in the front of the book, to recognize that you're somewhat Southern is also to recognize that you're thoroughly human, which is to say, we're not defined by any one region within our lives. Sex, sin, jubilation, and Jesus, universal subjects. With those kinds of subjects, I started asking myself a few questions, such as what prompted the need to share these difficult poems? And why are they patched together in ways that are not so easy to follow? And yet, Dwaine, you want to call them love poems. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And yet, here we are with the answer. Of course, sex, sin, jubilation, and Jesus. What better subjects to explore if we're interested in understanding our human nature better? To better understand that nature, so hopefully we can also deal with it better. Sex, sin, jubilation, and Jesus, it all comes together in a story from my past, a distant past, an event from way back in the 1960s when all the boys in my small high school were pretty much required to join the FFA, the Future Farmers of America. Whether you wanted to be a farmer or not, you had to join. And boys being boys, there was, no surprise, an initiation ceremony. But today, we would call a hazing. It's an event I'd largely forgotten for decades, probably because back then we lived in a mighty different world, a school world where teachers spanked kids who misbehave. And those rambunctious kids were always boys. Maybe occasional exception, but not in my world. They were always boys. It was a hazing event. Perhaps an impulsive sort of contorted way of coping with this dilemma of it always being boys. I began to recall the hazing episode a few years ago when I started noticing the news was becoming peppered with some fairly brutal college hazing events. The poem is called Initiation in Blue and Eagle. And it's a long poem that illuminates the story of this mighty secret FFA initiation ceremony that was, much to my ninth grader surprise, supervised by our ag teacher, which may be why I regard the poem as a kind of requiem, a meditation on a key image I recall from that odd evening of this teacher-led ceremony, this after-school day time when Mr. Johnson had all us ninth grade boys arrive to a classroom where the window shades were closed tightly, and he was up front, sitting at his desk, while at his sides stood all the senior boys. The image struck me because it was frightening. It was frightening because in my young mind, it looked like the painting of the Last Supper. Jesus at the center of the scene, Jesus being Mr. Johnson, and all the seniors, the disciples, aligned at his sides. It was a scene that sure made all the tenderfoots stay quiet as one of the disciples led us away from the group, led us to a closet where the disciple instructed us to, okay, guys, strip away your clothes. And in the darkness, we did. And then one by one, over the following hour, each new boy was led out to stand naked before the senior boys for a moment, before the inductee was blindfolded and instructed on how to perform the first test. Initiation in Blue and Eagle deals with this first test, a test whereby each blindfolded boy was to walk up a plank, his hands holding the shoulders of two seniors at his sides, these two disciples steadying the blindfolded guy as he walked up the plank, which, if you were that blindfolded guy, ultimately made you feel as if you were 5 or 6 feet, maybe more, off the floor, high up there. But in fact, of course, the plank wasn't elevated at all, because the two guys steadying you on that plank had started squatting down as you walked, their shoulders going lower so as to give the impression to the blindfolded guy that he was going higher. It was an illusion. The blinded freshman, sensing that he's stepping mighty high in the air, where at the end of the plank the teacher says, as the cackling room goes quiet to see how the inductee responds, the teacher says, jump. It's a test of trust, and in my mind, oddly reminiscent of Leonardo da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper, this initiation of young men into the illogical reality of human betrayal, all of which might seem a pretty grim scene for a poem. But this episode happened, and most of us survived it knowing, like any good farmer comes to know, the past cannot be undone. For as William Faulkner stated in one of his most famous quotes from Requiem for a Nun, a complex novel, Faulkner said, "The past is never dead. It's not even past." It's a quote that's sometimes misinterpreted, I think. Misinterpreted to mean that we're cursed by the past, shadowed by its tribulations, by its troubles. And that because this past is not actually past, we're somehow obligated to try to undo that past, make amends for what happened in a way that might somehow redeem that past, might serve as a payback in a contorted way that essentially may erase the mistakes. But I don't think that's the correct interpretation of Faulkner's quote. What the history-ridden Faulkner was illustrated, I think, is that the past stays with us because the past gives today its purpose. And that purpose is to do better, to remember that we don't have to continue living in a classroom where the shades are drawn over the windows, our vision blocked by the strong shadows of the past, when in truth what Faulkner was revealing was the fact that the old windows are often still with us, and our purpose today is to open the curtains in a way that will make this classroom of a world hopefully better. Faulkner was channeling the philosopher Henri Bergson, so the ideas are not totally unique to Faulkner. Still, the message resonates. Here are the closing lines from Initiation in Blue and Eagle. The air is dank. It widens every chill to the door, Matthew, and then another tenderfoot departing until blindfolded and naked I stand also before the cackling crowd. Small steps, they say, safe on the plank. Two guys at my side, experienced hands holding us up the unseen ramp. I walk and walk until our teacher says I must let go, and yes, sir, jump. Farming takes risk and adult daring. Crops wash out, legs trip. By definition, faith is blindfolded, a licking inside your head. Tongues may be horses, 5 feet up, maybe more. I have faith in our world and its teachers' losses where no bad part matters. A net below, maybe cotton. So I do it. I jump and my luck lands manly loud, such hoot and hollering the cloth comes off, and I behold truth in my body unblinded. My fear such a silly thing, for the plank rests flush to the floor. 2 guys crouched at my knees, Thomas and John, having slumped to make me believe. The master painted the Last Supper in plaster, its hiding room windows curiously open. Behind the believers, mountains are blue, colors flaking, sky unstitched from earth, belonging from want, men from screaming. In Da Vinci's painting, his Last Supper mural, the windows behind the men are in truth open. Only the disciples, the men, they're not looking outside to this better place. They don't know that those beautiful blue mountains are out there. And that is what the artist also left for us, the viewers, the people of the present time, to witness, to understand this better place where, as I learned from my folks, you could get to if you learn how to properly handle a red Camaro. There's another Requiem initiation poem in the collection. A requiem that deals with another stage of the initiation process, a stage where all the naked but now unblindfolded boys are lined up and told to stick an olive up their behind. Believe that? And when a senior yells, these tenderfoots are to take off racing to the front of the room. And as you can imagine, the rules say the loser must eat all the olives. Oh, these crazy boys. And now the poem, Initiation in Because and Olives. It opens with what I think is perhaps one of Faulkner's most important quotes. From 1954, Faulkner wrote in an essay, "You don't love because, you love despite, not for the virtues, but despite the faults." Because to farm is to garden, is to game, is to laugh, is to lose, and also eat because we must, the leftovers. Because but nakedness and olives belong, they said, up where every new guy must race, yes, to belong in the garden. Because despite feels like family to every believer who longs to love this world like a garden where no one's hungry. Because hunger and love are easily mixed up when up from some new guy's behind out falls his evil olive. Because boys will be boys and later men who must love despite knowing losers must eat all the olives. Because briars grow in our garden beside belonging and uncultivated running. Let them say, together we tried, because what they did, not to me so much as to another who, like me, had to learn. This too was our garden. No, no one had to eat the olives. The episode was simply a game, which I suppose was another disarming lesson in the nature of this world, a world that, as we farmers might need to best view, as a garden and a garden that would always need cleaning up. Much as at the end of this initiation ceremony, when all the young men had to help clean up the classroom, including uncovering the windows, so that when you looked out the glass panes, the world now looked different, meaning you, for better or worse, had changed. You had to see things differently, things that could be dangerous just as easily as they could be reassuring. For a chair might not simply be a chair. A car on cinder blocks might need a better translation in its meaning. A discarded, broken down old recliner on the side of the road, stuck there for someone maybe to pick up. That old recliner might say more about the man who used to sit there than what the odd shape of that thing had become because of the worn out springs, how its shape had changed. If you look at it from the side, from a profile view, it might become a letter, a message, which is to say, as Faulkner tried to tell us, sometimes we must love despite, because to live otherwise would leave us full of spite itself. Our capacity for love stuck in the past, our windows of today and the future not fully open. Open windows and a new perspective, what we can see in the contorted, worn out things of our lives. Let's move on to this poem. In the derelict place, a window. You might think someone left the old recliner behind for a new purpose. Springs shot, footrest level with head, the chair turned. So from the window, what you see is less what it was and more a plump letter V, an abandoned profile. A ruined thing in a derelict place. The window has reframed the worn out stuffing, flexed the spine to favor the hard starting letter. In a word like vanity or valor, a grin spray painted on the wall. If only we might trash our failures among outlived possessions, hurt reclining within desire's backroom decay, so indentations tatter like promising positions that invariably give when we must leave our broken parts to get better. Behind a shattered window, a V rest in trashed silhouette, one letter left over from the slow decomposition of lover. The chair back plush and buttoned down. From the slow decomposition of lover, the places we must leave so our broken parts can get better, the purpose in our past that, if we're lucky, are simply capable of dreaming. We can leave if we must. In a red Camaro. Thanks for spending the time with me today. And let me know what you think about these poems or any other broken down matters in this little book. You can find the email link on my website, which no doubt someday I'll also leave behind, that working link disappearing. Thanks in large part to the traveling power that endures. Your red Camaro.